But a warm welcome to everyone. I hope you're having a good weekend. If you're new to these sessions, these classes, the Sunday morning classes, or the CML or IMCW classes, please let us know in the chat, and we'll give you a very warm welcome. It's a very, very welcoming community, as you will find out. So just a little on the program, or the run of show, as we sometimes call it. We begin with a meditation, about 20 minutes or so, kind of settling, arriving meditation. Then Emily will lead us in some mindful movement. Thank you, Emily, as always. And then we'll have a talk. And today the theme will be mindfulness of the body in difficult times. You know, the power of bringing our awareness back to the body at any time, really, but particularly with the challenges we're facing in these times. So, and then we'll have, hopefully we'll have some time for some sharing and announcements after that, maybe a short closing meditation. So welcome everyone, and thank you, Jerry, for hosting and recording. Welcome everyone who's just joining us. So just a couple of words on the practice before we get into the meditation. You know, the kind of the instructions for mindfulness and meditation practice will be very familiar to many. You know, I think what I would stress is meeting whatever is arising with friendliness, with kindness, without judging it, without pushing it away, but opening to all that's coming up, you know, everything that comes up. If it's a painful bodily experience or a difficult emotion, it's giving us helpful information that we can meet, you know, we can allow to be here and allow to have its moment in the sun, as it were, and then when it's ready to pass. So that if we bring this kind, friendly, non-controlling awareness to our experience, we can come to get real insight about our lives and about our behaviors and things. You know, we can see things that, you know, may be very helpful, how we're holding on to certain views or opinions or pushing away certain experiences, and we can kindly, gently work with those and allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling. And, you know, as the Buddha taught, this is a pathway to the deepest freedom from suffering. And the first foundation of mindfulness, you know, which includes mindfulness of the mind and the emotions and the feelings. But the first foundation is mindfulness of the body. So we'll just invite a very kind awareness to what's happening in the body, as well as what's happening in the emotions and the mind as well. So if you, just to begin, if you just find a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. So sitting with your back straight, you could let your hands rest in your lap or on your knees or on the thighs, whatever's comfortable. You consciously invite relaxing of your shoulders. And if you like to, you can just let your eyes gently close, let the attention come inward and kind of drop out of the thinking mode down into the body. Just feeling the body, feeling the contact of your buttocks and thighs with the chair or the cushion, whatever you're in contact with. How that feels. Sensations of the feet touching the floor. Feelings of the hands, whatever they're in contact with your lap or your knees or the other hand. Maybe just feel the sensations of the hands from the inside. Noticing the sensations. Maybe there's pressure or warmth or coolness. Maybe there's some tingling or pulsing. And just feeling, experiencing the sensations from the inside. The Buddha talked about being aware of the body in the body. So it's not we're thinking about the body, but we're actually feeling the body from the inside, experiencing it. You might find it helpful to take just a few longer, deeper breaths to help you arrive and settle as fully as you can. Nice, full, deep in breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs. And then a long, slow out breath, releasing, letting go of anything you might be holding. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. The Buddha spoke of gladdening the mind, gladdening the heart, consciously inviting the heart and the mind to experience some happiness or joy. And one of the helpful ways we can do that is consciously inviting a smile or a half smile to our face. Activating the muscles around the eyes and the mouth. Just letting the face come into that expression of a smile. Maybe thinking about somebody who easily makes you feel happy or joyful, or somewhere that you feel really peaceful, calm. And you might let the smile be kind of the expression of how you want to meet whatever comes up, in your experience. Meeting it with the attitude or the expression of a smile. To see how it is to allow whatever comes up in the body, the heart, the mind, to just come, stay for a while, and then pass. So you're not trying to control your experience, but just be aware of it. Making space for this breath. Or a feeling of tightness in the chest or around the face or the eyes. Whatever comes into awareness, just allow it to come and go. a reaction in the mind, liking something or not liking something. Just notice that too. Just let the liking or the not liking just come up, be here, and then pass when it's ready. If the mind feels relatively relaxed and calm, you could just rest in this open awareness of what's coming and going. But if you find your mind is kind of going off a lot into thought, future, past, memories, daydreams, etc., it might be more helpful to have a specific focus for your attention. And one of the most commonly used in many traditions is our own breathing. So just letting your awareness of the in-breath and the out-breath be your focus or your anchor, where you rest your attention in the changing experiences of breathing in, breathing out. So whatever is most helpful to you, to see for yourself. Can this moment be a moment of peace, a moment of freedom? This moment just as it is, whatever's going on, letting go of the future, the past, just being present with what's here. This tension in the body, or this feeling of calm, or this difficult emotion, just whatever is arising. See if you can make space for it. And be at peace in this moment just as it is. And whenever you find your mind has gone off into problem solving or ruminating or worries, plans, daydreams, just gently and kindly bring your awareness back to the breath, or just whatever is coming up in your experience, back to an open awareness, whichever is or whatever is most helpful to you to help you be as fully here as you can be. Whatever's here, whatever comes into awareness, can you meet it with kindness and with acceptance? As the poet Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. And remembering that you can begin again in any moment, no matter how many times you get pulled into past or the future or some discursive thinking. can always begin again. Just letting go of what's gone before. And just meeting this moment with an open, friendly awareness. We'll finish with this poem by Mary Oliver. I worried. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I'm, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing and gave it up, and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. You take your time coming out of the meditation, opening your eyes, reorienting to the space you're in and being here together. Rebecca and I were teaching a retreat, a day-long retreat, and Emily was there and some others were there. And one of the things I just checked in with people about was the sources of people's, the challenges that we're facing these days. The difficult emotions, in Buddhist language, we'd call it the suffering that folks are experiencing, and just did an unscientific survey of how many people were finding that the kind of situation in the country was taking up a lot of their emotions, a lot of their mind energy, and causing a lot of suffering. And I think it was somewhere probably close to 2/3 of the people were experiencing what's happening in the country as as a major source of challenges, of difficulties for them. And I don't assume by any means excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so I've got a little chesty thing. I don't assume that everybody thinks the same way by any means, but I do know that that the Buddhist community, like some other religious communities, tends, and particularly in our part of the country, where most of us are based in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, I think the majority of us kind of lean in the progressive direction, and to recognize that there are a variety of opinions, and that we want to be welcoming to everyone. And at the same time, what I want to do is I want to be honest about telling the truth, at least as I see it in my own experience. And I know, and this is kind of my experience, but also from a lot of teaching, a lot of shit, programs with people, in our area and around the country, and kind of even more broadly, that the majority of people that I'm in contact with are finding this kind of current moment that we're living in a very challenging one, a very difficult one, and are quite worried about the direction the country is going in. I'm not making these points as like these are right, but I'm just saying what I believe and what many that I'm in contact with believe. There's a lot of fear about the future of democracy in the United States, something that maybe even in more difficult times years ago, we wouldn't think, well, we might disagree profoundly with the policies of the government, but we still thought we would still be operating within a shared framework of democracy. And there are many people, many of us, who really are very, very concerned that we may not be, and that there's already many of the signs. The New York Times did an editorial a couple of days ago on this theme, and they used 12 criteria of kind of the movement of societies from democracy towards authoritarianism. And they found that in all 12 of these areas, controlling the media, controlling other institutions, targeting enemies, etc., all of these, that in all of these areas, there was either that change had already been made or was in the process. So I think it's not just, Trump derangement syndrome, as it's sometimes called by people who are kind of want to rebut those views, and I think for many of us, having the existence of masked agents, picking people, grabbing people on the streets and detaining them and deporting them, and very often without any due process. This isn't a debate about what needs to happen about immigration, because I think we all share that there's things that the country needs to do, but about those kind of actions, they don't feel like the actions that ought to be taking place within a democracy. Similarly, the taking on of the actions to really put people in charge of major agencies like the DOJ, Department of Justice, FBI, who are loyalists and who are there to target opponents and to make life easy for people who share the views of the current administration. The targeting of enemies, the backward movement on climate change, attacks on diversity and equity. We could spend a lot of time listing those things out. But all of those concerns and fears that we have, I think are real, and they ought to be taken seriously. I mean, it's not that we ought not to be feeling this, but when those fears, or when our responses to these conditions and the emotions that arise within us go to a place where we become kind of really identified with our views, like, these people are bad people and they ought to, bad things ought to happen to them. Or we get caught up in fear about, this is going to happen and what will happen if something else happens, and we're going to go to hell in a handbasket. And we can get caught up in those thoughts of fear, anger. Somebody has just shared that I prefer to find a way to talk about how we handle challenging situations of any kind rather than a focus on politics. Well, I'm today using this as a kind of an entry point for how to work with what's arising for us with the emotions. And so if politics is challenged, then I invite you just to kind of work with what's coming up for you and use the approaches of the teachings to be able to hold those emotions. And I won't be spending a lot of time on this. I'm not going to, this isn't a lecture on politics, but it's a kind of a statement of how I see and how I experience the current situation we're in order to lead into what the focus of the talk is today. How do we deal with these emotions that are arising for us? How do we deal with the fear, anger, grief, sadness? Sometimes it's despair, sometimes it's hopelessness, worry, anxiety, all of these emotions which have a wisdom to them. They're kind of letting us know that there's something we should be concerned about. But when we kind of hold on to them, hold tightly to them, when we cling to them, and the Buddha speaks about it in terms of craving and clinging, when we hold on, and that can include the kind of pushing away as well, then we suffer. It's not about whether we're good people or whether we're bad people, but it's about, what are the consequences of holding on to anxiety or fears, kind of proliferating those things, sitting, watching, more programs on TV where we're taking in information that's telling us, this is really bad and this is really serious, and getting us kind of revved up. And that happens on both sides. I think we have to acknowledge it's not just one-sided. And so we get tangled up, we get caught up in fear, we get caught up in worry, anxiety. Very easily we get caught up in othering, turning the people that we see are doing these things as the bad people, the other people. They're bad, they're wrong. And I'm not saying that it's wrong for us to kind of say this is harmful behavior. Absolutely, we should be saying that. And I think as concerned humans, we should say, no, it's wrong. These actions are wrong. It's wrong to use institutions to attack people that you have some grievance against, rather than having a process where there is due process and it's impartial. It's not based on whether you believe this or you believe that. It's very important to name that. It's very important to be concerned about it. But once we turn people into the other, the bad people out there, then what happens is we get caught up in suffering. We get caught up in a kind of a diminished relationship to our experience. There's the good people and there's the bad people. And what the Buddha's teachings kind of remind us and really emphasize is that we're all awakening beings. We all have, you might say, we all have Buddha nature. Like the Quakers say, everyone has that of God within them. In the Buddhist understanding, we all have the capacity to wake up. And that those who appear to be very, very far from, who are acting, let's say, with cruelty and, creating divisions, they are themselves suffering beings. And so they deserve our compassion, as well as others who are suffering in other ways. That we need to keep everyone in our hearts. That we need to, as Jesus said, love your enemies, and many others have said, we need to include everyone. And any solution, if we look at it from a more political, social terms, any real long-term solution has to include everybody. Dr. Martin Luther King emphasized that, we have to love those who are causing suffering to us, who are attacking us or preventing us from having our rights. And he said, we'll show by our ability to suffer that we will win a victory, but we'll win them in the process. That our ability to with the word he used, to receive a suffering, to suffer basically, will be stronger than your ability to impose and inflict suffering, and will win you over in the process. And as he said, it will be a double victory. So we have to include everybody, those who we think of as, our opponents, or who are our opponents, have to be part of the solution. And so what I want to emphasize today is, how do we work with these emotions when they arise? How do we work with fear and anger and grief and worry and these challenging emotions? And what I want to emphasize today is it's essential that we come back to the body, that the body has to be at the heart of our practice, and is really the fundamental way of allowing us to be with these experiences and transform suffering into freedom. And I just want to share some of the quotes from the Buddha. Some of the things the Buddha said about mindfulness of the body. He said, "Within this fathom-long body is found all of the teachings, is found suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path to the end of suffering." So the whole of our practice is contained in this fathom-long body. And he said, there's one thing that, when cultivated and regularly practiced, leads to deep spiritual intention, to peace, to mindfulness and clear comprehension, to vision and knowledge, to a happy life here and now, and to the culmination of wisdom and awakening. What is that one thing? Mindfulness centered on the body. Mindfulness centered on the body is the pathway to all of this, to deep peace, to mindfulness, to a happy life here and now, and to awakening. We have to awaken in the body. He also said, if the body is not cultivated, the mind cannot be cultivated. If the body is cultivated, then the mind can be cultivated. So in order to transform the mind, which we need to do to free ourselves from suffering, it has to come through the body. It has to be grounded in the body. The body is the first foundation of mindfulness. It's the Buddha begins his whole teaching on mindfulness, which some scholars have called the most important teaching in the whole of the Pali Canon. The written teachings of the Buddha that were written down about 500 years after the Buddha's death. The most important teaching, one translator spoke of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The teachings on that, the most important teaching in the whole of of the canon and the whole of that, the written teachings of the Buddha from written at that time. And other teachers have said, this is a Burmese teacher, I think Burmese teacher Ajahn Buddhadasa says, do not do anything that takes you out of your body. Do not do anything that takes you out of your body. So what's fundamental is that the body is always in the present moment. The mind, as we know, can spend a lot of its time, our mind, elsewhere. And probably all of us here have experienced suffering from the way our mind has interpreted situations. For example, if we get really anxious, or really fearful, the mind can create scenarios that are kind of very scary, but very untethered from actual reality. And I'm not talking about kind of insanity here. I mean, that would be kind of the edge of the spectrum. But, probably all of us have, at different times, I've certainly experienced it, of when, I've kind of got overwhelmed by work, for example, and kind of trying to do too much and pushing. And the mind kind of gets into states where, particularly if it affects your sleeping and, your eating and your, connection with other humans, it's very easy to get caught up in, very distorted views of reality. So, we think of our minds, we think of like the way we see things as kind of like, oh, this is the way things are. But quite often our minds can be very tricky. I think it was Mark Twain that said, my life has been filled with terrible experiences, most of which never happened. That one, most of which never happened. But yeah, that the fears that we have about things, and the worries and the anxiety, they're kind of projections into the future. And yet reality, if we look back on things, we think, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. My mind painted pictures. I used to tell this a lot, bring this one in a lot that I hadn't in a long time, but it's the story of the monk in the cave who paints a picture of a tiger on the wall. And every time he looks at the tiger, he gets kind of freaked out and scared, And I love that image, because we're the ones that are painting the picture. And we're the ones that are getting really scared. We paint the picture and we look at it and say, oh my God, this is terrible. So like if we look at the political situation now, it's very easy. And, there's a lot of information that might lead us in that direction. But then we go painting the picture. We go, this will happen. And where will things be in 5 years? And, be, all sorts of things. I won't even get into details because it might be PTSD causing, but so we paint these scenarios, and we can't really get out of those scenarios through the mind. We have to come back to what's true, what's real, and the body is always in the present moment. This is the thing. The mind is often, as each of us knows very well, I'm sure, the mind is often in the future, in the past, somewhere else, often really disconnected from what's happening here and now, and disconnected from our own bodies. When we're angry, for example, think of road rage. Hopefully nobody here gets caught up in road rage or anything like that. But, when people do that, I think probably the majority of situations, they're not in any way aware of their bodies. They're just so caught up in their mind. This person did this, they cut me off, and all of this kind of stories in the mind. And coming from a real disconnection from the body, if we can come back to the body, this is the heart of what I want to say today. If we can just come back to the body when we're in when we're experiencing any of these challenging emotions and mind states, if we can just step into just what am I aware of right now? We could use the practice of rain, which probably many or most of us are familiar with, um, recognizing what's here, recognizing what's here. Oh, I'm really tight. My chest is really tight. I'm feeling really hot because I'm angry about, what that person just said, or having to sit on the line waiting for an hour and a half, whatever. I'm really tight. I notice my mind is spinning out. So just recognizing what's here, what's present. And then the allowing, A for allowing. Just allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling, allowing us to connect with our breathing. We might even just do this for a moment. If you just take a moment to think about something that was difficult for you, maybe in the last week or so. It could be about the political situation, could be something personal, and just come in, maybe remember what was said, where you were. Maybe it's, it could go back further, just to a difficult situation, not an overwhelming one, but something that was challenging. Just come in and just recognize, if you can, just recreate that scene, that situation, maybe with somebody close that you had an argument with or a conflict with. And just notice what comes up, what's present, and recognizing what's here. And then just allowing what's here to be here. Let the sensations, let the feelings, just let them be here, let them express themselves. Allowing what's here to be just as it is. And sometimes just recognizing and allowing can be enough to, just process, allow, just to let whatever's here have its expression, and then maybe it can pass. But often these emotions, these mind states can be quite tenacious. They can have a very strong pull on us. And then it's very helpful just to do some inquiry into them. And as probably many of you know, Tara Brach's done a lot of writing and teaching on this rain, and some of her questions are things like, what's calling for my attention here? What's the most difficult thing about what I'm experiencing or what I'm believing here? What emotions does this bring up? Where do I feel the emotions inside? So we can really give time to just allow this kind of process of gentle inquiry into what we're experiencing. Now, another question is, this this vulnerable, hurting part of me, if it could communicate, what would it express in the words or images or feelings? So we can do this kind of gentle inquiry into our experience. What does this part of me need most right now? It could be just putting a hand on your heart, maybe a hand on the belly. Maybe it's just it's a statement of caring from yourself. I care about this suffering. Just bringing kindness in. And the N of rain is, in earlier teachers, Michelle McDonald, I think, originated it. It was non-judging, just, or non-identifying, not identifying with the experience, not making it a me thing. And what Tara Brach has done is kind of shifted it more in the direction of compassion, towards nurturing, towards calling on a wise part of ourselves to hold this experience. So it's in this kind of way that we can work with fear or anger or difficult emotions, difficult experiences, and coming back to the body and bringing awareness to the body is really at the heart of this this practice of this kind of working with difficulties, the challenges that we face. But I wanted to share a couple of other quotes. This is from Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now. He says, unless you stay present and inhabiting the body is always an essential aspect of it, you will continue to be run by your mind. He says, so when challenges come, as they always do, make it a habit to go within at once and focus as much as you can on the inner energy field of your body. Just going into the body, feeling the body, particularly at the core, the area of our torso and face. He says the fact is that no one has ever become enlightened through denying or fighting the body or through an out-of-body experience. Transformation is through the body, not away from it. He says, do not turn your attention elsewhere in your search for the truth, for it is nowhere else to be found but within your body. Nowhere else to be found but within your body. Like the Buddha saying, within this fathom-long body is suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path to the end of suffering. So I want to kind of move towards winding to the end of this reflection on mindfulness of the body. One thing I mention is that the Buddha in his teachings talked about, effort. When we make effort, the effort we make is in two areas. One is to abandon what's unhelpful, and the other is to cultivate what is beneficial. And abandoning what's unhelpful, the first of the two practices, the first is to prevent the arising of unskillful states, fear, anger, worry, hatred. Prevent those states that haven't yet arisen. So one thing we can bear in mind is, what is it that contributes to us getting caught up in fear, worry, anxiety, anger, hopelessness, despair, whatever it is? Excuse me. What is it that contributes to this? One thing I think that's pretty important is how we take in information. If we overwhelm ourselves with information, we take in too much information, or we take in kinds of information that tends to be triggering. I personally find it easier to read the newspaper than to watch the TV news, particularly because the nature of the society that we live in right now um, one of the most important things that has been monetized in this, this period that we're living in, but, mainly in our lifetimes. It was there before, but, and particularly in the last, 25 years, is our attention, our attention. And, if you can hold somebody's attention, you can sell them things, you can make money, you can get rich, and so there's a battle about holding our attention. And so the news programs, they sell, as we know, fear, drives people, influences people more than love. If you had an evening news that was just about good stories, people would, oh, that's, for a while would probably say, oh, that's really nice. I want to hear some good stories. And there are people doing this, and I think it's really good that they're doing it. But it doesn't tend to be the way, within our culture that, and within our, our way we use our attention, that keeps people focused. People would probably after a while say, oh, it's very nice, and I can always come back to that. I'm not going to do it. But if there's worry there or fear there of like, oh, what's happening? I need to, I need to be careful. I need to know about this. I need to watch the news. And yet it's telling us things in ways that increase, and particularly, the way that cable television is, that, one side is over here, one side is over there, and they're kind of, one side is doing it in a more harmful way, in my humble opinion. But still, it's happening in both ways. There is a kind of wanting attention. So it really behooves us to watch how we use our attention. Where are we putting our attention? Are we putting attention into areas where we're triggering ourselves? We're just taking in information that's kind of getting us more anxious, more worried, more angry, more fearful. So stepping away, taking in the news. I think I take in a lot of information, but I've made choices where it has to come, I do much more reading where I can process things in a slower way than if I'm watching a program. I tend to be very judicious. I try and be very judicious about what TV programs I watch, just for that reason, because it's so easy to get triggered. I'm talking mainly about informational news kind of things, opinion kind of things, rather than movies or whatever. But how, making choices, making skillful choices. I think this is tremendously important because, we're setting ourselves up for suffering if we don't pay attention in that area. We don't watch carefully, take close attention to how we take in information. And it leads to, if we can do that well, we can prevent the arising of unskillful states of mind, of, of anxiety, of fear, of worry, and these other more anger, more afflictive emotions. And the second of these wise efforts is to abandon states that have arisen. And that's where mindfulness of the body is so central to. When we become aware that we are caught up in, an unskillful emotion, a painful emotion, the first thing, as Eckhart Tolle says, first thing, bring your awareness into your body. There are practices that you can do to do that. Some of them have acronyms like stop, take a breath, observe, I can't remember, take a breath, observe, and then proceed. I think that's the way that one goes. There's another one that comes from mindfulness-based relapse prevention called SOBER, kind of aptly called SOBER, which is stop, observe, breathe, expand awareness, and then R is for I resume or kind of go back to what you were doing, whatever. But sober, stop, observe, breathe, expand awareness, and resume. I have to check on the R. But so the essence, though, of coming into the body and allowing ourselves to feel what's here in the body, kind of making that step, into recognizing, allowing, investigating, etc. And just so that not so relevant here as well, but the other two practices of wise effort, what these are called, the four great endeavors or efforts. The first two are to abandon the unskillful that hasn't arisen, to abandon the unskillful that has arisen. It's present for us. And then the other two are to cultivate qualities that lead to well-being. Cultivate compassion, gratitude, generosity, loving kindness. So, practicing to open our hearts, practicing loving kindness, practicing compassion towards those we disagree with, or loving kindness towards them, practicing equanimity, consciously developing the quality of heart where we meet the joys and the sorrows with an even mind, an equal mind, that we we meet the world's the eight worldly winds of gain and loss and pain and pleasure, praise and blame, success and failure. We meet them. We see that this is the nature of life. There will be praise. People will like what we do, and others will not like what we do. So that we'll get that. We'll have successes and we'll have failures. We've all had them in our lives. And to be able to step back and see that these are not about me or mine, they're about all of us. They're about life. This is what we get with being human. We'll get some things that work out well and some things that don't work out well. And things that don't work out well, hopefully we can learn from. We'll have pain and we'll have pleasure. We've all experienced this. If we try to have, focus, I've got to get more of the stuff I like and less of the stuff I don't like, then that's a recipe for suffering. We're going to inevitably suffer because the life will be as life is, and we don't control it. We can control certain things, but we can't control everything. And so can we make peace with life as it is? And that's the path to freedom, to make peace. And that doesn't preclude in any way changing what we need, what we believe needs to change, but doing that changing from a place of peace, from a place of equanimity, not from a place of fear or anger or blame or judgment and all of this. So making peace with life as it is. Peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome.